Well, welcome back, everyone. Hi, this is John Dupuy, and this is the Journey of Integral Recovery podcast. And Doug just informed me that it is episode 21.
21.
So we're just about, we are adults. We can vote now.
Does that mean we
and, no, you can vote at 18 now. Anyway, so it's 21, 3 sevens. I'm sure that has cosmic significance, but I'm not going to try to figure it out right now. But what we had on episode 19, we were just about getting to the end of the Enneagram. We had 2 points left, 8 and 9. And then we had that fantastic session with Dr. Adam Gorman.
Yeah.
So now we're going to get back to finishing the Enneagram. And the teaser last time I said, moving to point 8, that there's somebody who quite famous, is in the news daily and likes to tweet. Now, who could that be?
Kim Kardashian?
Yeah, right. Maybe, I don't know. It could be, but it's DT, President DT, Donald Trump, and he is an 8. And you might, well, I don't know. So different people have different reactions to him, but I can tell you I'm not going to get into that right now. But anyway, he's an 8, okay? And 8 is the PowerPoint, okay? And it is also called the venge, because 8s are all about, unhealthy 8s are all about vengeance and getting back. And if you've been following Donald's career in the last, few months, or since he emerged on the national scene in a big way with this the election campaign, he's all about, and he's always trying to get back and hurt people. And my wife, Pam, who's a very accomplished therapist and clinician, talked about 8 as being the angry victim. Okay, not one time in this whole Trump enrollment with all the just missteps and dumb things that have happened, and the offending of our allies and getting together with our enemies, all this crazy stuff, he's never said, "Oh, I made a mistake. I'm sorry." It's incapable of that. It's like, that is just 8 at a really low level. And you're interesting enough that people like Christie, and what was the former mayor of New York, Giuliani.
Right.
Thank you. Oh my God, Giuliani is a classic 8, and so is Christie. And so 8s often attract 8s because, it's like, it's all about power, wink, 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 and you get it. And like Kid Rock and a lot of the kind of people that are 8s, 8s like 8s, Putin, Trump, it's like, regardless of nationalities and things like democracy and dictatorships, Duterte, they kind of get each other at that level. And it's about power. And I'm being a counterphobic 6. I'm always knocking heads with 8s. And sometimes counterphobic 6 can actually look like 8s because we're powerful and we go to the fight. But, it's like, bam, 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 knocking heads against the power, and we're fighting the power. So there's that aspect to it. Now, and the kind of low pathological end of 8, you're a sociopath. It's all about power. You have no conscience. Do you think the fact that he might have hurt some people and kicking all the people off Obamacare, the 28 million or however many people, do you think he loses sleep over that? I don't think so. And sociopath is a definition of personality disorder. You have no conscience. And you can ape emotions and get this and that, but you really haven't achieved that type of thing. And of course, with it's an extreme form of narcissism, as we see in President Trump, it's all about him, and nobody really matters except as they reflect on him. So that is extremely, in our face, everyday example of a negative 8. However, on the other hand, if 8s ever do get it together, and not many of them do, because it's really hard to get through that angry victim thing. But the ones that do get together can be absolutely world-changing leaders and heroes. And a really good example in our American history is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the power. And he changed everything. He laid his life down on the line, and he knew he was going to get killed. He walked into that with an open heart consciously. In his last speech, he says, "I'm not going to be here with you much longer," but just showing. So if you are an 8, it's a typical point, all right? And our prisons are full of them, quite frankly. There's more 8s in prison than there are any other points, because it's unhealthy 8 is so powerful and so it can be so dangerous and just like this. But if they do get it together, they have this potential to be absolutely phenomenal leaders. And I always problems with 8s across the board. And I had a client who was an 8. And what I learned from working with that client is this tender, vulnerable, I think she called it a jelly bean self inside, that's been so hurt. And there's just this, that's protection, you know. And if you can get over your projections, as in me, and get down to see the vulnerability and the hurt, then you can start. And then it changed the whole story for me when I really experienced that with the woman I was working with. It changed my view of AIDS forever. So what do you say, guys?
You know, John, this applies across all the types, but I think it is perhaps more clear and obvious with the 8 than any of the others, which is that your level development or stage development really clearly defines the way that your typology is going to manifest and shows you the way that you need to ascend through stage development too, which requires, of course, doing the work and doing the practices to get that inner perspective, to realize what you need to go through to grow through the stages and become the best version of your type, because the gifts of the 8 can just be incredible, but boy, can the unhealthies cause chaos for everyone.
Yeah. And often with a young 8 or not evolved 8, they have no idea what it's like, you know, the bull in the china closet. It's like, what do I do? You know, it's like there's not a lot of awareness how they impact people, and they just think it's natural. And with growth and eventual, you know, a history of just shattered china, your whole path adventure, they go, well, maybe, maybe it's me wrecking the china. Then self-awareness begins to emerge, and that's the beginning of wisdom, as it were. So and the need to get back, you know, vengeance. If you cross an 8, you know, it's like they say revenge is a dish best served cold. You know, they will come around and they will get you, you know. And I remember there was a correspondence dinner that President Obama was kind of being roasted, and Trump was there, and Obama just dissected him with humor. And at that moment, he was going to get back Obama. And I think his whole thing about Obamacare and anything that attached to any policy, whether it's NATO or this or that or the other, it's not so much, he doesn't really care about the policies. He just wants to get back at Obama for kind of humiliating him in a humorous way at that meeting. I really believe that. And you'll find that in the 8 structure. So if they can get over there being an angry victim and heal from that and heal that vulnerable place inside, then you can become a world leader. However, if you have a disorder, a characterological disorder, it ain't really fixable, folks. Is that right, Bob? By definition, it's just, there it is.
I think I mentioned in a recent podcast, a cover article in a recent Rolling Stone magazine. The title of the article was "The Pathological Narcissism of President Donald Trump." And as I shared in the previous episode, this wasn't one of these excoriating kind of polemics, you know, let's just wipe out Trump. It was actually written almost as a clinical case write-up, looking at the characteristics, in this case of Donald Trump, and comparing them to the diagnostic and statistical manual that's used in psychiatry and psychology, looking diagnostically, just one after the other, each one of these criteria. And the article discussed this last question you asked, is that it's particularly challenging working with narcissistic personality disorder, which is really the argument of this article. One can agree with it or not, but it's worth looking at it and at least reading it in context. Is that one of the challenges that working with pathological narcissism is, you've already commented on, John, is that what's the problem is that narcissism is egocentric to the extreme. And so any other voices in terms of a we space of second person, it's categorically denied. With ironically, the pathology denies that input, and so it makes it very difficult. I certainly know over the years of practice, I've had a handful of clients that were bona fide narcissistic personality disorders. They were never there because coming in for themselves. It was always referred kind of at gunpoint, and it was always somebody else's fault that they were there. So really challenging. There's been a lot of advances made in psychotherapy working with this disorder. So I don't want to be the bringer of doom and gloom with it, but the challenges are really
you better know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, it's a specialty unto itself.
Yeah, and oftentimes if we haven't dealt with that ourselves, either personally or professionally or clinically, And we are mere neurotics. We kind of project that everybody's trying to do their best, and we have some, we're not perfect. We screwed up, made mistakes, and blah blah blah. And this person was part of that. It's not the same. And my wife is a very experienced clinician and therapist, very successful, and she used to say it's characterological. And I was like, I didn't like that at all, because in my paradigm, there's hope, everybody can transform. But I learned that there's just a layer of, oh my God. Okay. And one of the things in dealing with an 8, I've guided through the wilderness and had clients and blah, blah over the years, is that if you try the soft touch, they'll just think you're ridiculous and say, oh, this is just a mark. So if you're dealing with 8, you've got things that would wound you desperately. You just got to confront. Say, shut up and sit down, or you're going to jail. Read my lips. And they go, oh, okay. Wow, okay. I can listen to this person. He's real. And it's like, that would be what? You can't do this. So you have to learn that. And maybe, just this direct coming from a place of strength, because that's what they respect. And that's why 8s always love each other, because they see another powerful person. Trump looks at Putin and go, man, somebody gets in the way, he just takes him out. That's a leader, and Giuliani too was like, oh my God, Vladimir's such a great guy. And I'm like, what? He's this bloody dictator who's destroyed democracy in his country and just kills people, his people that oppose him randomly,
Let me toss in another piece here. I think it was prefigured by something you said, Doug, as well. Be happy for you to riff off of it. Is that looking at what we're talking about in terms of narcissism, or the shadow side, let's say, of an 8, is that the tricky part here is for us to remember that all of us developmentally start off, actually, we don't start off with a sense of self at all, but our first sense of self early in development, in the first 2 or 3 years of life, is profoundly narcissistic.
Sure.
And so when we talk about transcend and include in an integral unfolding, we all ideally will transcend that kind of rank narcissism of a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old. And when you see somebody who doesn't, it becomes increasingly problematic. But there's not a one of us that can't access that narcissism or the bad side of 8 within ourselves. And in fact, if you put us, any one of us, in enough stressful of a circumstance, we'll devolve to that. So I guess some humility, realizing that that am I, there goes me, and to do our own inner work around this as well.
Oh yeah, and 8s can be just brilliant dealing with as counselors or therapists with people in early recovery, because they just cut to the chase. I mean, there's so much denial and everything. If you have an 8 working on you, ain't going to get away with that. They're just going to cut right to the truth, and it's just like, and I've seen that work really well in treatment programs. And so there's if that power can be evolved to a place where it's no longer just narcissistic and the angry victim stage, look out, Hannah. It's, you can change the world, I mean, people with great power, have great responsibility. And if you are 8 and you hear, you better get your act together, brothers and sisters, because you're going to really screw up a lot of people's lives, including your own. So you got to work on yourself to get to there, because we need your kind of heroic power and capacity at a high level, So that's the scary and the cool thing, it's like with all this kind of, there's also this tremendous capacity for change the world in a good way.
Yeah. We all have a tendency to follow strength, to follow certainty. And that's one thing that the 8s are really good at, is uniting people. So when that strength and certainty comes from a place of being unable to be wrong, obviously we end up in a situation like we're in now, where we're not going to adhere to the Paris Climate Agreement anymore. We're going to go our own way because we are so certain, or we're following, our president's certainty on the matter, for better, for worse. But anyhow, when a leader develops their capacity to take perspective, when they ascend through the stages, when they realize that we are all moving towards a single world, single cosmos, and start to think of ourselves as one people and can unite us, then we have a brilliant guiding hand to follow in innate, and that is a powerful gift that they can bring to everyone.
Mm.
Yeah. So work on yourselves, dear beloved eights, because you matter. One way or the other, you're going to matter. But let's just do this thing for good, shall we? And that's where you're going to find your great joy. And you have the power that us other types sometimes maybe dream about. So, but power can be used for good or ill, as we know. So anyway, I don't know. I think we've covered that pretty well. And so the last but not least is the 9. And boy, it's a big shift from the 8. And the 9 is the Peacemaker. Okay. My wife, Pam, is a 9, but boy, she has an 8 wing. And she also, the 9 moves to 3, the doer, achiever, when they get healthy. And she has a capacity for work and focus and getting things done that just humbles me. But anyway, a 9 is a peacemaker. Often the 9s have very diffuse boundaries. Okay, they can, like, if they're in a therapy group, it's like, whose feelings am I feeling here? Because you're so identified and you can move so empathetically, and that can be, if you don't know how to deal with that, that can really be a problem. Or if you learn how to make that a strength, it can be a great gift. 9s can make tremendous therapists because they have that empathy, that capacity to really be with people. And when they learn how to kind of play that, what's self and not self and higher self and all these things, they become extremely gifted. And they tend to be natural mystics, okay, because of the diffuse ego boundaries that they really kind of get the one with the universe. I mean, they probably move into mysticism or unitive non-dual experiences perhaps easier than any other point, which is pretty cool, which is nice because my poor little scared 6 self moves to 9 when I get it together. So I move towards natural, 9ness at peace and unity. So they also tend to really avoid a conflict. So I remember one time I was doing a sweat lodge years ago with a dear friend of mine who was he was pretty fundamentalist at the time. And then I had this 9 guy and we were doing a sweat out and he wanted to sit on some kind of cushion or seat in the sweat lodge. And I'm like, don't sit on a God blessed seat, sit on the earth. And we just started getting into it. And he said, at me. And the poor little 9 friend, he was out of the lodge, heading for the woods. He didn't want to. Then finally came back a while. If you guys, got it together, because they're so sensitive, they're so intuitive that being around that kind of stuff can be really painful and threatening. So there's avoidance of conflict. There's this peacefulness. There's this intuitive, empathetic capacity. And the problem of the 9s that have not moved, in course, into the 3 self is they're kind of just laid back and kind of, they don't want to do anything. You remember the children's book, Ferdinand the Bull? And he would be sitting there, up on a hill and all the other young bulls and they're all playing, bulling around. He would just be eating a flower and watching the sun and the wind and the moon and all this stuff. And that's kind of a 9, they're just, they have this, the 9s do great in nature. They can really open up to their surroundings like that. So it's really the peacemaker. And they will try to take, as the counterphobic 6s and the 8s knock heads, they'll come in and be able to help us to resolve these things. So, gentlemen, any comments?
I have you go ahead, Doug, and I'll follow on you.
All right. I was going to say that I have something around this that I would kind of like to explore. I have taken the Enneagram test a number of times over the years. I would love to get the 2 of your thoughts on this. And while I believe that I am most strongly a type 5 with a 4 wing, I also, especially in the earlier times that I took the test, tended to score very, very high on 9, often even above my 5 wing 4. And because
what parts of 9, Doug?
Well, all of it, really. I can even read the description and identify with all of that, particularly wanting to keep the peace, being conflict averse and conflict avoidant, cherishing the unity and wholeness, the peace and solitude in nature, the ability to kind of move into the feelings of others and ignore what's really going on inside me. All of that was true. And of course, as a 5, one of the reasons I think I'm 5 is that I have a theory about why this was and why it has shifted more towards 5 again over the years in my recovery. I think that I adopted the behaviors and the strategies of type 9 largely as a coping mechanism for the shame of my addiction. I sought to avoid any kind of conflict as a way to protect myself. And I devolved into the feelings of others because of the shame. My own feelings, my things didn't matter. And so I adopted, and this is unhealthy 9, of course,
Sure.
not a fully developed 9. But as I have gotten healthier in my recovery, I have shifted more back towards what I think is my true typology. And this is all becoming clear as I study it and think about it and continue to do the practices. So you guys have any, I don't know, thoughts about that, whether I'm onto something?
And also, when you grew up, it wasn't really safe. You didn't feel loved or even safe in your household from what we've talked about. And that, man, and there's so many of us that come out of that. I mean, Bob, your story, I had a very gifted brother. My parents were pretty good. I mean, all the stories I've heard about parents over the years are like, God bless you, Mom and Dad. And I said in the introductory of my book, when I was in growth process in grad school, we spent 3 quarters like processing our stuff. And I'm going, all my crap is mine. My parents don't have anything to do with it. They were good enough in a big way. And I'm probably still in denial about it. But anyway, I desperately loved it. But my brother was a little high strung, and he, I shared a room with him, and I always kind of had to, kind of be 2 steps ahead to make sure it wouldn't get dangerous or threatening for me. So much of us are who we are is a reaction to a lot of things. There's a lot of things, but how we grew up and where we loved, where, we walk in the breakfast and our mom's face lights up and Dad gets home from work and, come here, son, let me give you a hug. God, I love you, stuff like that. And you go, wow, I am loved in the world. People want me to be here. And if you don't get that, then it can cause problems. And I think there's studies, and I think Guy Duplessis talks about that, how there's correlations between the unhealthy, familial childhood environments that directly can affect people's vulnerability to becoming addicts.
I like that. Doug, I really appreciate, so you were talking about in terms of your 5, I appreciate your reflection on this, just what you just shared. So first of all, I want to thank you for that. I always appreciate your, to me, really profound self-reflection. And a thought occurred to me. I really liked how you linked your own 9 to almost like a way to ward off shame or to protect yourself from having shame maybe activated in interactions and so on. It occurred to me, and I don't know, John, maybe because you have such familiarity with the Enneagram, I wonder if there's been much writing or reflection in the literature around how these different styles and different patterns or different types are informed by addiction and how those play out with kind of different faces, like what you were talking about, Doug. That's one particular manifestation. Mine as a 7 has its own. It'd be really interesting to explore that. Maybe it's been done, John. Do you have a sense of that?
Well, yeah, I don't know if I talked about it in my book or not when I went over the Enneagram, but I've had a lot of like informal discussions about it, whether being in panels or teaching or just talking with people about it. And I think, it's like, the perfectionist, it's like, oh, you're a perfectionist and you're anything but perfect. The shame that's inherent in that contradiction, that is a natural to want to numb out, and just stop that voice of self-criticism, and an unhealthy one could do on themselves, or you can do it on other people. So, you could go through and an unhealthy 2 becomes very codependent, and trying to serve and everything, and forgets the place where real strength and real service comes from, and to numb out that pain of not being enough. And the 3, you want to be a doer and achiever, and often the 3 focus is very exterior. You want to get the diplomas, you want to win the medals, get the trophy bride, all that exterior stuff. And that, of course, that leaves incredible empty existential vacuum in your soul. And what are you going to fill that up with? After a while, all your accomplishments mean nothing. And it's like, either you're going to go deep or you're going to start numbing out. The 4, again, very vulnerable to that stuff because of the sensitivity. of the four, you know, and being so sensitive and artistic and everything, and not having a world that doesn't respond to you that much. You know, your gifts aren't honored because, you know, we can be, I mean, the sin, the United States, we're a very three country. We're a very achiever. You're a country that the countries that criticize us, justly or not, it's never, oh, those lazy Americans. You don't hear that. No, we're not lazy. We're anything but lazy. You know, maybe we're gonna, you know, chop down every tree in the on the planet, you know, to make a buck, but we're not lazy. And so, you know, we have to go into, well, the six, the unhealthy three goes to six, which is loyalty and service and, you know, all that stuff. So anyway, so you can see how that vacuum can be created by the three. The four, and actually fours are more prone to commit suicide, or at least attempt suicide, than any other point, because that deep sensitivity. So you got to be aware of that. And my older brother committed suicide, and I've had friends commit suicide. And so when people go there, I take it, and I wanted to commit suicide, quite frankly, for years. So I take that stuff seriously. Yeah, you know, very seriously. The five, you know, you could use drugs to heal the dissociative patterns. You know, you're so cut off from yourself, you know, you're living in your head, and it's the empty vacuums of the mind that's not connected to the heart and the body, right? And you could use that to heal the split. And I'm just kind of theorizing about this. It's not thus saith the Lord, you know. And the six, it's fear. Have a drink, bud. You know, oh, now I can, you know, I'm a drunk, and what was a Jimmy Buffett did the song, I'm a drunk and a fearless man, or something like that. So you use, you know, drugs to calm that, you know, the constant underlying anxiety of just being in the world, you know, which a six, an unhealthy six can do. For the seven, what do you say, Bob? You know, what did drugs and alcohol do for you?
Well, as we talked about in the previous episode, as a seven, I was already prone to Dionysian extreme. Always was. You know, my initial identity really was as a drummer. I mean, that's honest to God. That's the perfect expression of myself, and it served me as a seven in terms of the brokenness or the shadow side. It served me, as we've discussed, in terms of spiritual bypassing. Yeah. So it took what is already my strong suit and then perverted it, kind of for the purposes of denying or numbing out or bypassing stuff that I needed to do around some deep level work with trauma and so on. So yeah, that's my experience with being a seven, and it actually made it. It was very disguised for me, because it's like here was substance and getting high, and that's already what I value. It wasn't like, as I mentioned, it wasn't like doing something other than what I do. It was just taking it down a route that I wasn't aware of. And it was very much kind of the foot in the door. It's a very gradual process for me. I didn't wake up one day and become addicted. Over a period of time, over a period of years, it began to increase more and more. And so all the way along, I felt like it was, I never felt like a hypocrite. I felt like, no, this is Bob Weathers. This is what I do. This is what I've always done, and didn't realize how far eroded I had gotten from a path of a healthy seven, let's say, or a healthy Dionysus.
Yeah. And you know, of course, eight, I mean, there's a lot of pain in the eight, you know, the feeling of you're kind of different from everybody else. And, you know, you walk in the room, everybody goes, oh God, you know, there's that thing, and that you could either use drugs and alcohol to loosen that, to open your heart, to heal that, you know, that vulnerable jelly bean self inside, or you could become more powerful. You know, you do meth and coke, and nothing can stop me now, you know. So there can be various things, you know. That's why people can use you know, stimulants and amphetamines and methamphetamines to be powerful, you know. When you're on the run, you can do anything, and that craziness. And a nine, of course, would be just to numb out from the pain of the world, you know, that incredible sensitivity that the nine has. You know, it's like, oh man, I don't have to feel pain for a while. It's a painkiller. You know, I can just relax. I can float off into the land of dreams, you know. So heroin could really be, you know, an alcohol. You could see that. And nines tend to have, drinking problems too. That's something that could,
John, let me dive in here real quickly. I want to make a mention of something around the nine, and it might apply to the four. You can help with this, Doug, as well. Just this last week, I viewed a documentary that was created a couple of years ago. Maybe you all are familiar with it. It's just simply called Sensitive. a documentary called Sensitive, and it's based on Elaine Aron's research. She's a research psychologist back in New York. It's based on her research, and it's actually been replicated internationally, that 1 out of 5 people on the planet are what's referred to as sensitive. And it's not to be, they get labeled as shy or fearful or avoidant or odd. Sometimes they get labeled as being on the spectrum of Asperger's. But what this research has uncovered is that 1 out of 5 people on the planet, cross-culturally valid, have these 4 characteristics that set them statistically apart from the other 4 out of 5. And the characteristics, when you were describing a 9, John, I kept thinking, wow, this sounds like, they call it a highly sensitive person, an HSP. The first characteristic is depth of processing, is that just as a cognitive process, this person takes stuff and reflects really much more deeply than is the norm. Right next to that is the second characteristic is, maybe because of that and because of a certain kind of perceptual style, they tend to be overstimulated. That is, it's like life comes and it's, what did Wordsworth say? The world is too much with me. It's like, that kind of sense. The third quality tied into what you were saying, John, about being emotionally empathic, emotionally attuned, tend to be much more emotionally sensitive than the norm. And the fourth characteristic of this sensitive or highly sensitive personality is they tend to be extremely sensitive to subtleties or nuances. They notice details that people don't catch. And so, and as it very much in sync with an Enneagram, as Elaine Aron and the other psychologists, et cetera, were reviewing this, they said that it's in its shadow form, this leads to real dysfunction in life in terms of almost impossible to sustain relationships, very hard to launch into one's life and contribute. But then, as you can imagine, with those characteristics I just named, and it makes me think of all the artists, for example, is that if that can somehow be managed and healed in terms of its limitations, these highly sensitive people are the movers and shakers in the creative domains, in the helping professions, and so on. So the first time I thought about it, John, is that you're talking about the 9s. There probably is some significant crossover with this highly sensitive person, this sensitive person. Yeah. And there might also be with the 4s too. I don't know, because you're more familiar with this, but it's an interesting piece. And what I like about it, it's, this was developed in the last 30 years since I was in graduate school. So none of this research was done when I was in graduate school. I'm just getting familiar with it right now, is that in the same way as with the Enneagram, this is not a pathologizing nomenclature. If you get diagnosed as an HSP, as a highly sensitive person, it doesn't presume any pathology at all. It may go a pathological direction, certainly in our society, like you said, our society, which is so extroverted and so doing oriented. If you're one of these people who's very, very, very sensitive, it probably is a maladaptive environment to grow up in, but it doesn't have to be pathological. In fact, it can be your greatest gift. So, and you'll
need to find a coach or a guide or a Mr. Miyagi, right? Who can make this thing that can kill you into a superpower. And that takes work and transformative practice to do that, but it's a great gift.
Let me recommend this as a start for anybody that resonates with this. If you're not sensitive yourself, you're in a relationship to somebody that's sensitive, because all of us have somebody in our family that's sensitive, is that if you go online and just look up sensitive documentary, up will come a link to this. It's linked to Alanis Morissette, the singer. So her songs are wound through this because she describes herself as one of these. And so it'll appeal. It's really well done in terms of the aesthetics of it and so on. And I think it costs $10 to download it, but it's really worth understanding your husband or your wife or your son or your daughter, or maybe yourself. So I recommend that, especially in the context of our talking about the 4s and the 9s with the Enneagram. So
and you have to learn. I just read a book about the same subject. I think they talked about it differently, but there's a lot of practical advice about in toxic relationships. You can't do that one too well, so you need to really protect yourself. And and get out of the space. If it's going to hurt you, especially if you're in recovery too. You can't hang around with people that are going to drag you down. You need to hang around as much as possible with people that are going to meet you where you're at and lift you up. So. It's a very two-edged sword, but it can be a superpower, and it really needs to be acknowledged, and then trained and learn how to channel it and how to use that capacity.
There's an interesting piece, John. I just thought of it as you're talking. The popular assumption, particularly in the U.S., might be, well, that sounds a lot like women. Actually, what's interesting, cross-culturally, including in the U.S., 30% of highly sensitive personalities are male. So it does load up in terms of the feminine characteristics, but 30% of biological males are highly sensitive. So it really opens up the discussion to be across both genders.
Yeah, and you'll find in twos, the helper, there's a lot more women that are twos than men. It's kind of a natural thing to go to. You do find men in the six, as far as our sensitivity, because everything is scary in the world's a threatening place. You're always scanning the environment. So you can become, often sixes develop intuitive gifts. They can read people's minds, or they can see the future before it happens. They start getting into these psychic zones. Helen Palmer, our original Enneagram teacher, was a phobic six. And she was just like, she was psychic. I mean, she could, just pick up things. And she was running draft dodgers into Canada during the Vietnam War in New York State, and she said they'd be good, ready to smuggle another load of draft dodgers off, and she would go, "No, I'm not going, not this night," and they would get busted. So she was able to kind of use that and feel, and so that kind of capacity. If you're a cop, if you're a soldier, I mean, you can see how these things could really be useful gifts. Or if you're a draft dodger smuggler.
I just find all that fascinating, Bob, and I'm so grateful to you for sharing that. I'm going to go look it up as soon as we finish this recording, and I'm also going to post a link to that documentary on the website for everybody to easily be able to find it. Not only do I certainly seem to embody that from both a 9 and 4 perspective, or both, but I think too, I was thinking about introversion and social anxiety. Now, I am very much, I think there's a lot of confusion about those in our culture. Sometimes people misattribute them. I'm a classic introvert in that I need some alone time to recharge myself, to process, to think, to put ideas together, to explore things, and spending too much time out in the world with too much going on is definitely too much. That may be related to exactly what you're talking about and what this documentary is talking about with being a highly sensitive person.
I'll dive in real quickly, Doug. Just this will further pique your interest, is that in Elaine Aron's initial research in the late 1980s, she assumed that she might have found a different entry point into introversion, and in fact discovered that it's a different factor, and so statistically they don't line up. There will be some introverts, in this case you, that would perhaps be highly sensitive, but there are plenty of extroverts that are this way too. So it ends up being they call it in statistics, it's an orthogonal factor. They're statistically unrelated, which is very curious. You'll find
I may be a two-legged walking orthogonal factor.
I'm pretty sure you are, John. I'm pretty sure you are. Anyway, I interrupted you, Doug. I want you to continue. I just want
I was going to add that, I do have some social anxiety too, and partly that's related to shame, but working through it is really, really important. And I started to do that by confronting it directly, first with my acting classes and exposing myself in that way, and then eventually letting my writing be seen, still under a pen name, of course, but exposing my creative work to the world in that way. Still, it persisted. I remember the first time I met John, I had sent him an email, and he responded with, "Well, let's talk on Skype," and I went, "Oh no!" Just all this fear, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to, but was so grateful too at the same time, and I'm glad that I had worked on that enough that I was able to go do that. These podcasts, I love being in the two of your company and get a lot of value from this, but
likewise,
there's certainly an exposure there too, and my sensitive nature likes to shy away from it. Working through that and showing up, doing this work, sharing my thoughts is so good for me, and hopefully for the people listening, getting some value out of this, but finding a way for each of us in our lives to work with that and act in spite of our sensitivity could be
or
so
to make
powerful.
your sensitivities your gift. Learn how to that can be wonderful. And, you know, in talking about I've always been interested in kind of extroversion, introversion thing. And in grad school, they told me there's a spectrum, you know, the introvert over here and the extrovert. And then most of us are somewhere in between on that scale. And the introvert is somebody who gets refueled by being alone. And the extrovert is the person who gets refueled by being with people. You know, let's go to that. The introvert, let's not, man. I'm going to go off, you know, and go sit on the mountain over there, or go sit in my cave. And you know, I tend to, and people like you, an introvert, you know, because the introvert, you know, blessed or cursed with extrovert gifts. You know, I probably don't come off as an introvert here because, you know, you would think it, but definitely I need alone time to refuel. And luckily hanging out with my dog and my wife is not, you know, refuels me, you know. And they say I'm a sexual subtype on the Enneagram, which doesn't mean I'm obsessed with sex any more than the rest of us. No, but it means that I'm much better communicating one-on-one or with a small group as opposed to, you know, big crowds. And that seems a bit overwhelming and much. And, you know, when I go to conference, I'm getting better at it because I love being with people in the conferences that I go to these days, that the transformational technology stuff and the integral things that I do and the recovery stuff. But early on, if I was going to present, you know, I would just do my time. Hi, thank you. I'm glad I head to my room, meditate, or find a gym, you know, and spend, you know, minimal time, you know, pumping hands and everything. And then I just found out that I was missing so much richness and treasure because so many beautiful, gorgeous, wonderful people that go to these things and who changed my life just in being relation and contact with them. So, yeah.
Well, I bow to the three of us. I think all three of us are introverts. John, you and I can teach and speak and so on. And Doug, I completely bow to your courage in facing this. I've told students of mine over the years, I've taught for 35 years, my entire adulthood, is that after all those years of teaching, you would think that Bob the introvert would get over that introversion. And I wear an undershirt underneath my shirt because if I don't, the sweat of my speaking in front of a class seeps through, and that's 35 years down the road. The other thing is I always have a glass of water because my anxiety being in public makes my throat dry up.
You get cotton mouth, yeah.
I'll end up with laryngitis if I'm not careful. And so the odd thing is that I love doing this, John. I love doing what you and I both, I think both you and I are wired to love doing it, but it's, Jung called it the opus contra naturam. It's the work against nature. It's the work against my introversion. And I bow to you, John, for how you bring it to the world. And I bow to you, Doug, for your courage to do ever more of that. And all three of us, ironically, doing this podcast are blessed introverts.
Yeah, you know, and it definitely takes all kinds, you know, and again, and the more I do, like against my nature, you know, God is, you discover God in the rejected parts, you know, you go into the shadow stuff, that's where you find the light and the illumination. That's why we can't avoid that. And then, yeah, our callings, our vocations forcing us, you know, and Doug, I just want to say, you bring this beautiful, I don't know, sensitivity, you know, it's just like to it when you're sharing, it's something so real and precious about it. That I'm sure it's, you know, people are picking up on that.
We had my partner Colleen came on as a guest a few podcasts ago, and afterwards she said just what you said, John. She said Doug's perceptiveness and his sensitivity is so tangible, and you and I agree, John. But it was really telling to me that Colleen, meeting you for the first time, having you be a co-host, completely got that and highly valued that, Doug. That's your contribution hugely.
Yeah, not just as a guy that knows where to stick the wires and what switches to turn on and what website and how to do all of that. But yeah, it's been wonderful. It's been really. So how are we doing on time?
I think we're about there.
All right, beautiful. Well, look, you guys, again, it's been a super pleasure, and we didn't get to the question. Remember, Bob?
Yeah, we'll do that the next time.
Okay. Anyway, one of the things that we want to build into this, we get these beautiful questions, these probing questions and emails and the Facebook stuff. And so we're gonna start, you know, maybe we'll just have a podcast. We do nothing but answer those things because I'm just so impressed by the quality of people that have been attracted to this and are coming on board with this. So.
Yeah. Doug, how would people get further questions to us. I know we have the Facebook group that's now by invitation only and is kind of invisible unless you're invited to it. But I'm just curious, your recommendations. We'd like to invite listeners to this podcast to be able to contribute. Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah. Well, we have two really good ways to do that. One, like you mentioned, Bob, is the Facebook group. If you visit integralrecoveryinstitute.com/community, you can find that link there and request to join. Either Bob and I will approve you and come ask us your questions. We try to be pretty present there. Bob especially is pretty present there. And that's a good way if you need immediate help with something. If you have something that you think is going to require a more in-depth answer, more discussion, or that you'd like us to explore further, you could also send it directly to our email address. Visit integralrecoveryinstitute.com/contact and pass us your question in an email. I think that's a great idea to collect a few of those things and do an episode here soon where we go through and just answer questions.
Yeah, and we'll also protect everybody's anonymity when we're reading the questions. You know, you won't be identified. You know, just say, this is a question we got from a person, you know, or whatever, how you say that. And, but yeah, I love the questions that we're getting, and we'll probably have to do that next time.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, and look forward to the great guests that we're going to be, have a whole list of people now that are signing up, and I have to ask. So we also be getting women on here. If anybody's going, this really feels like a male thing. Well, remember, all our mothers were women. Okay, so we're deeply connected to the feminine, and yeah, it was interesting. I just saw the movie Wonder Woman, which I thought was fantastic. I mean, the first half hour I kind of got bogged down, and then it grabbed me. And there's been this discussion on whether Wonder Woman is a feminist film, and I would say it's post-feminist. Okay, because they, you know, I mean, obviously, the gorgeous woman. I mean, she is stunningly beautiful, the woman that plays Wonder Woman. I was like, who can pull this silly role? I always thought Wonder Woman, you know, in the tight little thing, it was kind of a silly thing. She does it with such gravitas and beauty, and the beautiful, caring, loving, feminine heart, along with all that strength. I mean, that is like, you know, having your cake and eating it too. It's a really extraordinary thing, and I would say that's beyond, you know, early feminism to a post-feminism that brings an integration of masculine and feminine in a very beautiful way. So it's a great myth and story that's emerging right now, and boy, we are in the golden age of television and film. There's some creative souls out there that are just nailing it, you know. Anyway, with that plug for the movie, hey, love you guys. Thank everybody's listening and showed up. And again, Doug and Bob, thank you so much. And I can't wait till we do it next time.
Yes.